If you looked at the handout, you saw that I wanted to start things off this morning with a little bit of audience participation. Before we begin this audience participation, I want to encourage you not to be shy in this. Otherwise, it's not going to do what I think it's going to happen, okay? So don't be shy in this. Don't worry about interrupting anybody else. I shouldn't do this because I want to, interrupt. I want to be polite, let them have their say. Then, what I'm looking for is everybody kind of talking loudly at the same time. Okay? You might think, picture, if you will, reporters trying to get their question through to whoever they're trying to speak to, the senator, the governor, the president, whatever, in a news conference, how they all speak at the same time, trying to get the attention of that individual. I expect it might get a little loud, so I don't want things to get totally out of control. So when you see me doing this, that means, okay, enough, okay? All right, you got it. That means we can stop at that point. So I hope you gear yourself up for this, all right? Again, don't be shy. Don't be shy. So I want you to do this on the count of three. All right, is everybody with me? On the count of three, what I want you to do is shout out the titles of popular Christmas songs that don't bring up Jesus. Again, that's popular Christmas songs that don't bring up Jesus. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Keep on. Let me hear some. Okay. Some of you are kind of smiling. Some of you thinking some of you are liking that because you thought, hey, I get to shout at the preacher. That's not necessarily what I wanted to shout, but hey, I shouted at him. That was all right. So that's okay. That's all right. You guys did all right. But this next one's going to be a little harder. I think that part was pretty easy. Here's what I want you to do, okay? On the count of three, I want you to shout out the titles of popular Thanksgiving songs that don't bring up God. Popular Thanksgiving songs that don't bring up God. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Over the river and through the woods. I got one. Okay. You see what happened there, right? I'm going to admit it, all right? I myself, I the other day when I tried to come up with the names of popular Thanksgiving songs that don't bring up God, I had no problem recalling the titles of traditional hymns and popular Christian songs about giving thanks to God, but coming up with the titles of popular Thanksgiving songs that don't bring up God was so difficult for me that I ended up doing this internet research. And lo and behold, they're out there. They are out there. So it seems to me that among the most popular, Over the River, Through the Woods, okay, that's one of them. But it seemed like on the internet, the most popular ones were some like Adam Sandler's Thanksgiving song. Bing Crosby's I've Got Plenty to Be Thankful For. 5 Little Turkeys by the Learning Station. And Matthew West, Gobble Gobble. If you've not seen that, prepare yourselves. I think I might show that tonight just for fun. Now, some of those songs, folks, they've been around for years, but they just never took root in my mind as, being important or related to Thanksgiving. And the reason I'm bringing all this up has to do with the fact that there's this song in the Old Testament written by King David that up until this year never really took any root in my mind when it came to being a Thanksgiving holiday type of song. I've never used this morning's text in any Thanksgiving message before that I'm aware of. And the psalm I'm talking about is the 9th Psalm. The 9th Psalm. I encourage you to open a Bible or a Bible app to that. And while you're doing that, I'll just share just a little bit of info with you. The word psalm is a Greek word, and it means a collection. And so what you have in the book of Psalms is a collection of songs and poems that were meant to be sung in worship gatherings. The book of Psalms is actually an ancient worship manual. And so Psalm number 9 is the 9th song in that ancient worship book or ancient hymnal. And the way I see it, what David does in the 9th Psalm is he does this whole mix of things. He recalls things in this song that God has done. He describes in this song what God is like. He encourages people in the song to join him in singing praise to God. And the thing that he does most of all in Psalm 9 is pray. The song is a prayer to God. Now, if you and I were to read the entire 9th Psalm, what we'd find as I worked our way through it, that we find David in that song, praying to God that God will keep on keeping on as far as keeping him safe. And he also prays that God will destroy his enemies. And I think that's why. Through the years, I've never really associated very much the 9th Psalm with the Thanksgiving holiday. Because overall, I've always thought of the 9th Psalm as being a prayer for deliverance. And it is that. But this year, it really registered with me that the song is both a prayer for deliverance and a song of thanksgiving. And we can learn a lot, I believe, from its first 2 verses when it comes to our being thankful to God. And so on this Sunday before Thanksgiving, I want to zero in on only the first 2 verses of Psalm 9. And I want us to consider 5 things that I have concluded we can learn from David in these first 2 verses about being thankful to God. Psalm 9, if you're following along in a Bible app, you're going to see this. Psalm 9 begins this way. I will give thanks to you, Lord, with all my heart. I will tell of all your wonderful deeds. I will be glad and rejoice in you. I will sing the praises of your name, O Most High. The first thing that I see that we can learn from David about being thankful to God is this. Being thankful to God is a choice. Notice the first 2 words of the song. I will. I will. You see, with those 2 words, David's made it known that he has made his choice between being grateful and ungrateful. He has decided to be thankful to God. I will give thanks to you, Lord. These words also, I think, help us to see that David recognizes that being thankful to God, it's not automatic. It doesn't just happen. Those words help us to see David realizes also that being thankful to God isn't something God makes us do or forces upon us. Rather, our being thankful to God is something that only happens when we choose to make it happen. Now, being thankful to God, I believe, involves our choosing to focus on the positives, choosing to see the blessings, choosing to magnify the good things in our lives, and thanking God for those, rather than doing just the opposite. I don't know if any of you noticed this or not. I know 1 or 2 of you noticed, but this morning my car's not in the parking lot. And there's a reason for that. It's not here because I had it towed yesterday to the auto repair shop. Broke down, needs repaired. Well, when I told Lori about the car breaking down on Friday, she said 2 things to me. First, she said, you probably should have bought that truck that you were thinking about buying last week. And then she made the comment, she kind of commented about the timing of things with the car breaking down, right before the holidays. And I responded by saying something along the line, yeah, I know, I thought about those things too. But then I said, you know what else I thought about? I thought about how things could have been a lot worse. I thought about how the car could have broken down last week when I'd made a trip to Decatur. I thought about the fact that the car broke down only 2 blocks from the house, and I was able to actually coast home and right up into the driveway. I mean, if your car's going to break down, how much more convenient can it get than that? Now, could I have focused on the negatives and become angry and ungrateful? Sure, I could have done that. But you see, I decided to follow David's lead. I chose to thank God. I chose to see the positives. Day by day, folks, moment by moment, it's up to us whether we are going to be thankful to God or not. Now, secondly, we also learn from David that being thankful to God should be a passionate priority in our lives. It should be a passionate priority in our lives. David wrote, I will give thanks to you, Lord, in a small corner of my heart. No, he didn't write that. He wrote, I'll give thanks to you, Lord, with half my heart. He didn't write that either, did he? No, what he wrote, I will give thanks to you, Lord, with all my heart. with all my heart. All my heart. I want you to take note of those words. Let them just kind of sink in for a moment. I got to tell you, I did that this week, and I felt convicted. You know, friends, I think we all understand that going about something half-heartedly means we're not giving that thing priority. It doesn't mean that much to us. On the other side, on the other hand, you know, we also understand that going about something wholeheartedly means we're giving the thing priority, that it means everything to us. We're passionate about it. And David's comment about thanking God with all of his heart, folks, it doesn't just describe the fact that David was very intentional and purposeful and passionately offering thanks to God regularly. His comment about thanking God with all of his heart, I believe, is in the Scriptures to remind us that we should approach our being thankful to God in that same way. Now, third, another thing that we can learn from David about being thankful to God is that our being thankful to God, it'll find its way into our conversations. It'll find its way into our conversations. David wrote, I will tell of all your wonderful deeds. Well, of course, David would tell others about God's wonderful deeds. After all, when you've got a heart that's filled with gratitude towards God, you're going to be talking to other people about it. It's just what you do. I mean, think about it. What does a huge Cardinals fan talk about? Help me out. World Series? Cardinals baseball? Right? Okay. How bad this season was this year. Sorry, brought that up. Wasn't too good for the Cubs or any Central anyway. Well, what's a new grandparent talk about? The new grandbaby, right? What's a 4-year-old that doesn't want to go to sleep talk about? Anything and everything, right? In Luke chapter 6, verse 45, we find these words of Jesus. A good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart. And an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. Now let me read that last comment again. Jesus said, the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. You see, David's heart was so full with this incredible amount of appreciation over the things that God had done that he just naturally found himself talking to other people about the wonderful things that God had done. And you know what? If your heart and my heart is full of gratitude to God, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do the same thing. And oh yeah, by the way, don't be surprised if talking about the things that God has done for you opens the door for you to talk to somebody else about Jesus and how Jesus has made forgiveness possible and made a future in heaven possible for us. I mean, think about this, okay? Let's say you recently visited a new restaurant and you had at that restaurant what was, in your opinion, some of the best, if not the very best, apple pie you've ever eaten. Chances are you're going to talk about it, right? Chances are you're going to say something to somebody because remember, you know, the mouth speaks what the heart's full of, sometimes the tummy too, but you know, the mouth speaks what the heart's full of. So you ate this great piece of pie and you find yourself talking to somebody else about it. And no matter if the person you're talking to likes apple pie, you know, or not, they're going to respond. They're going to react, right? I mean, if they do not like apple pie and you talk to them about this great apple pie, that may be the end of the matter. But on the other hand, if they think, you know what, I love a good piece of apple pie, they may ask you some questions about the restaurant. You know, questions like, well, what's the name of that restaurant? Where's it at? Is it expensive? Are there some other pretty good things on the menu, you know? Well, friends, I believe the same type of thing will sometimes happen to us when we talk to other people about the good things that God has done in our lives. We'll talk to other people when we tell them some of these good things that we have seen or observed that God has done in our lives. Some people, who really aren't interested in hearing more about God, that'll be the end of the matter. You bring it up, and then that's the end of the matter. But on the other hand, some people, when you talk to them about the wonderful things that God has done in your life, they may suddenly find themselves spiritually hungry. Kind of like the apple pie lover's mouth begins to salivate as you talk about this great piece of apple pie and where to get it. And what will happen is those people who become spiritually hungry, they'll want a taste of what you have experienced for themselves. And so they may ask you some questions, start asking you questions about this God who has blessed you so much. What I'm wanting you to see, folks, is that it is entirely possible. It is entirely possible that even the simplest appreciative remark, something like, God has sure blessed us with some great weather lately. I want you to see how a simple remark like that might evolve into a conversation about Jesus. And I want you to understand if that happens, you see, then you get to talk about the most wonderful thing that God's done in all of human history. And the sending of His Son. Again, David's words here teach us that they teach us, or at least they remind us that our being thankful to God is going to find its way into our conversations. Now, a fourth thing that we can learn from David's words here is that our being thankful to God has far-reaching positive effects. Far-reaching positive effects. David wrote in verse 2, I will be glad and rejoice in you. Listen, if you will, okay, because I really think this is important, so important for us to wrap our minds around. I don't think, friends, it's just coincidence that David's words here about being glad and rejoicing follow rather than precede his words about making choices to be thankful. You see, I think David understood that thinking about and focusing upon the good and the positive things in his life that were going on and being thankful to God for those things, I think David understood that had a way of lifting his spirit and ushering in this upbeat attitude and gladness and joy of heart. And I think David understood that having those things, the upbeat attitude, gladness and joy, I think he understood that those things, having them in his life in turn, would have a positive effect on everything else that was going on in his life. A Harvard study reveals the far-reaching positive effects of being thankful. Ken Shigematsu, in his book Survival Guide for the Soul, wrote that Sean Achor, a psychologist who teaches at Harvard, has got a international bestseller. This is where I think he drew the information from. But Ken Shigematsu, in that Survival Guide for the Soul book that he wrote, talks about this. And he brings up what Sean Achor, the psychologist who teaches at Harvard, came up with. Achor suggests that we can train our brains. We can train our brains to become more grateful by setting aside just 5 minutes a day for practicing gratitude. He cites this 1-week study in which people were asked to take 5 minutes a day at the same time every day and to write down 3 things that they were thankful for. They didn't have to be big things, but they had to be concrete and specific, such as, I'm thankful for the delicious Thai takeout dinner I had last night. Or I'm thankful that my daughter gave me a hug or something along that line. I'm thankful, my boss complimented me at work. The participants simply expressed thanks for 3 specific things at the same time every day. And according to Achor, at the end of 1 month, the researchers followed up and found that those people who practiced gratitude, including those who stopped doing the exercise after only the 1 week of doing it, those people were all happier and less depressed. Remarkably, after 3 months, the participants who had taken part in the 1-week experiment were still more joyful and content. And get this, okay, it's incredible. After the 6-month mark, they were still happier, less anxious, and less depressed. And the researchers hypothesized that the simple practice of writing down 3 Thanksgivings a day over the course of 1 week primed the participants' minds to search for the good in their lives. Now, you might guess what I'm going to suggest you do this week. That's right. I am suggesting, I'm encouraging you to do that very thing. Once a day, at the same time of day, take the time to write down 3 specific things that you're thankful for, which took place within the last 24 hours. I even gave you a little form there. Did you see that? Opportunity, a paper there with plenty of slots and plenty of days for you to do that. The 8th day is for those of you who are really overachievers. So this is the 7 days there, okay? But seriously, I encourage you to do that. I mean, after all, folks, think about this. We're talking about something that will take just about a half an hour. A half an hour during the entire next week that has the potential to make the whole of your life better for the next 6 months. And of course, ultimately, I'm bringing this up because whatever it is that we're thankful for, the thanks goes to God. It goes to God ultimately because, as James writes in his New Testament letter, every good, every perfect gift, every blessing that you and I receive, it comes from God. Now, so far, I've shared how we can learn from David that being thankful to God is a choice, that's something that we should be giving passionate priority in our lives. I've also shared how David's shown us that our being thankful to God will find its way into our conversations and that it will have these positive, far-reaching effects. Finally, this morning, when it comes to our being thankful to God, there's one more thing that I've concluded that we can learn from the opening lines of this song that David wrote. And that is this. Our being thankful to God will result in our worshiping and loving Him. Through the years, I've been thankful to a lot of people for things that they have done for me or ways that they have blessed my life. And I have come to love a lot of people because of the way they've treated me and dealt with me and blessed me. But I've never, ever come to worship those people. I shouldn't say that. I did make the mistake of doing that once in college. And it was a mistake I repented of and have never looked back, never done that again. Never put another human being on the pedestal that God only belongs on. But here's the thing. If we recognize that every good and perfect gift comes to us from the Father, as James writes, it is going to result in our worshiping Him and loving Him. David ends that second verse with the words, I will sing the praises of your name, O Most High. Now, I think David, when he wrote those words, literally meant he was going to sing praises, words of praise about God. But you see, the essence of what David was saying is this. As you think through those first 2 verses and just meditate on them, you realize this. David's in these first 2 verses saying, I know what's going to happen. I know what's going to happen. I know what's going to happen. When I make myself think about the things in my life that I'm thankful for, I know what's going to happen. It's going to spontaneously just lead me into a worshipful frame of mind. David's helping us, you see, to see that it's inevitable. It's inevitable. If you and I purposefully choose to be thankful to God, we are going to end up worshiping Him. We'll worship Him because as we think about the good things He's blessed us with, we'll realize we're not deserving of them. And we'll remember that He chose to give us those things. I mean, of course God chose to give us those things, right? He didn't have to bless us. Nobody made Him do it. I mean, of course, nobody makes God do anything. After all, He's God, right? He's God and we're not. We can't make Him do anything. Nobody can make Him do anything. And yet, as we think about these blessings, we think about the things that we are thankful for, we remember and we realize that the good things that God has given to us, He's given to us by choice. And so we find ourselves as a result of all that, being compelled to worship him and to love him. Right now, as we approach our time of decision and invitation, there's a different scripture. There's a different scripture that comes to my mind. It was something that Joshua said to the ancient nation of Israel while he was letting them know they have a choice in the matter. You'll remember this. Joshua told the people, he said, choose today who you're going to serve. And then he said, but as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. And I think David's opening words here in these two verses, they imply, I think, a similar challenge. It's almost as if David was saying to the ancient nation of Israel back then, and he's saying to you and I today, choose today if you're going to be thankful to God or not. But as for me, David wrote, I'm going to be thankful to God. And my hope is, of course, that you and I will be like David, that we will choose to be thankful to God.